Welcome everyone. It is Thursday at 3 p.m. and that means it's time for TeikaTV. So I'm Joe Doobie. I will be your host today. I am lucky to be joined by Kathleen and Alex.
Hi everyone.
Hi everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about measuring sponsored products success. So this is an exciting episode for us because we've talked through over the past several weeks a lot of different strategies around keywords and bidding and budgeting. But today we're going to spend a majority of the time discussing how you can actually measure your success, what you should be looking for, and giving you some benchmarks in the marketplace that we see through our thousands of sellers that we're working with. So we're going to start right at the top in terms of those impressions and clicks and talk about click-through rate. We'll then dive right into conversion rate. So of those clicks that you're getting, how many sales should you expect? And then once you've got that conversion, at what cost is it coming to? So taking a look at ACOS, what you should expect, and again, giving you some averages across the marketplace. So before we dive in, thanks everyone who's joining us, and we're excited to have the conversation with you. So as always, we want to keep this conversational. Drop in a comment, let us know where you're joining from. We'll give you guys a shout out. And if there's anything that comes up during the presentation and show today that you have a question on, drop the question in there and we'll be happy to answer that and keep the dialogue going. So before we dive into those measurements of success, let's hit a little bit on some news for this week. So one thing we've given the warning the past 2 weeks on is that long-term storage fee. So we're down to 1 week. Today is February 8th, and that hits on February 15th. So last call for all you sellers out there who have aged inventory to come up with your plan on either getting that shipped back to you or trying to sell through it before that week deadline coming up.
And you could use sponsored products to try to sell through it.
No, that's a great point. So it's definitely an opportunity to create a campaign with that objective to liquidate, right? And you may carve out a couple different products and be okay with spending a little more than normal if that means you're going to avoid those fees.
Right, and those are fees on items that have been aged over 6 months in FBA, right?
That's right.
That have not made a sale.
Right.
Okay.
Looks like a couple of our friends are joining. Hi to Mike, dropping in a comment. Good to see everyone joining the show today. Another big piece of news, continuing on the Whole Foods side of things, was that free 2-hour delivery.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
So it looks like they're piloting it in a few geographies. So Austin, Texas makes sense. That's where Whole Foods is based. Dallas, Texas. And then a couple random places.
Virginia Beach.
Yeah, we were saying Virginia Beach and Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati.
Surprising.
Interesting.
choice.
Good for them to be able to sort of test that out and see how it goes. I know it's something I would definitely take advantage of. Yeah,
I know. I wish it was in Boston.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
They said free 2-hour delivery, right?
Yeah, if you're a Prime member.
That sounds amazing. I wish I lived in Virginia Beach.
Never leave the house.
Yeah, I know. How about that?
Might be warm there too.
Awesome. Yeah, and then the other piece of news that was getting some play this week was just looking at the market cap of Amazon and how it's just growing so fast, and we've hit on this in weeks past, but they may be the first to $1 trillion company, right? So their market cap is hitting right around 700 billion, and they're neck and neck now with Microsoft. So a lot of articles about how they're overtaking that number 3 spot in terms of most valuable companies behind Apple and Google, and then Amazon and Microsoft are fighting it out for that 3rd spot.
Who do you guys think will get to the $1 trillion company first?
It feels like there's just so much more momentum behind Amazon than the rest.
Yeah, that was interesting. Alex mentioned earlier, like the growth rate is just like so much faster.
Yeah, there was this great article that we were discussing beforehand where if you compare the growth of Amazon versus Microsoft, Amazon is exponentially outpacing the growth per quarter as compared to Microsoft. So totally agreed. I mean, it has to be Amazon, right?
I think so. I think that's where the money is.
Or do you guys think Apple will come in an underdog?
Yeah, I mean, Apple's number 1 right now, and they have a huge amount of cash in terms of R&D. I mean, they just announced their Alexa-like device, so I think they're taking pre-orders now. So it's definitely a battle between Apple and Google Home and Amazon Alexa. between trying to get that space in your home to listen to everything you're saying, right?
Super interesting. Actually, Apple turns over their inventory every 5 days. They cycle through all of their inventory in their retail stores.
Right.
That is insane to me.
Yeah,
every
crazy.
5 days they cycle through it.
Right, and for being such a valuable company, I mean, we talked about this at the Edge conference this summer, that they have 6 main products, right? So, I mean, for being the most valuable company listed in the stock market today and have such a small catalog of products is incredible.
I always forget that. They only have 6 items, that's right.
So hi to Maria joining us from Florida. Jamal saying the stock market is fake. I don't know about that, but yeah, let's get into sponsored products. I think that's a good segue. So measuring sponsored products. So what should you be looking for? So if you're a seller just getting started, obviously the big piece here is to get more attention on your products. And the first thing you'll get is impressions. And impressions you don't pay for, right? They are anytime your product shows up on a page. And we were discussing, what is it exactly that's showing up when your ad shows up? So you don't have any, in sponsored products, there's no flexibility, there's no ad copy, you're not writing anything, you don't have any say in what's showing up, right? So with that, you have your main image, you have your title, your price is in there, your rating, your ranking. So there's, people know what your product is. So when you're looking at impressions and then actually getting that click, the question comes up, well, what is a good click-through rate? And what does that mean to have a good click-through rate? So the click-through rate is going to be how many clicks you get on how many impressions, right? Clicks divided by impressions. So when we look at that number, the average we see is about 0.3%. So it's a really low number just because there's so many impressions out there on Amazon, right? So many searches, so many search results, so many people flying through pages. So about 3 in every 1,000 impressions we see is the average to acquire that click.
How does that differ between, like, if you're looking at the click-through rate on a keyword, like the match type?
Yeah, so if the more specific you're getting, the higher chance you have at increasing your click-through rate, right? If it's a very generic term and it's something where it's a broad match or an automatic campaign and you're sort of loosely associated with that search term or keyword, you're not going to see as strong of a click-through rate. The click-through rate is going to be the strongest where it speaks to that customer. It's exactly what they're searching for. Maybe that actual search term is right in your title, right? So if I'm searching for my black yoga mat with a travel strap, and that's what I see as in the title, the click-through rate you're going to see there is going to be strong.
Yeah, so I would actually be worried if you had a super low click-through rate for a keyword that had such high relevancy to your products.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely something to monitor and be concerned about, right? If you see a click-through rate where it's really suffering way below that 0.3% and it's a keyword that's really important to you and highly relevant to your product, I would then start asking, what is actually showing up? What image do you have? What's your title? Is your price point just so high that people aren't even clicking the product?
Are your reviews like 2 stars, 1 or 2 stars, or negligible, no reviews?
Right.
Like, that's definitely a big indicator to me of what your results will be like for click-through rate.
Yeah. Looks like we got a question in from Maria from Florida. She's about to ship to Amazon today or tomorrow. How do I go about benefit from your sponsored products campaigns? Provide some writing materials or provide video training. Yeah, so absolutely. So if you're interested in those types of materials, head to our website, TeikaMetrics.com. Get in touch with us and you'll be able to speak with someone here who can direct you to some of our materials. We have, take a look through our Facebook page and past videos. We've walked through the whole process of setting up campaigns to adjusting keywords and bids. So take a look through those past videos and get in touch with someone on the team here. We'd be happy to talk you through the process and get you connected.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, if we go back to the CTR super quick, I had a
And what does CTR stand for?
CTR, i.e. click-through rate. But I just my brain was whirling while you were talking. When we're talking about that, are we discussing the SKU click-through rate, or are we discussing the click-through rate of a keyword or like a campaign, or what's the most prominent area to focus on here?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you should be looking at it at all levels. When you're looking at, I mean, I look at it at that keyword level to start to say, okay, are these keywords, you know, not really relevant? Am I not getting any clicks on this, but I'm still getting impressions? That's indicating maybe something's wrong. But I would look at it at all sort of levels of the business. So from the keyword on up through the campaign.
Yeah, I would agree.
Looks like Jamal's loading up his ad reports now to take a look at his metrics. So everyone should be doing that as well.
Yeah, let us know what the click-through rate is.
Yeah, it would be interesting to drop that in the comments once you've taken a look at your reports. Let us know where you stand on these metrics that we're going to be discussing. So we've got our impressions, we got our click-through rate. So now the person shopping on Amazon has clicked your ad and landed on your product page. So the next thing that's really relevant is that conversion rate. And if anyone is just joining us now, thanks for watching the show. We're going through how to measure your success in sponsored products. So we first hit on that click-through rate and now diving into conversion rate. And we'll be hitting the metric that everyone is fixated on, ACOS, momentarily. So, you know, as we dive into these, let us know what questions you have and let us know where you're joining from, and we'll give you that shout out in the comment section. So click-through rate, now conversion rate. So what is conversion rate?
The number of orders divided by the number of clicks, right?
You passed, yes. That's good. So yeah, I mean, it's once someone lands on your page, you got that click, how many clicks does it take for you to get an order? And measuring that is really important because that's going to tell you not only how effective your ad is, but how effective your product page and your offer is. Because you've already sort of passed the point of the advertising piece, right? They're on your product page now. You sort of got what you were hoping for in that visitor. But now, what's going to actually determine if they check out? Right. So what we typically see on that conversion rate, and again, this is going to range based on your category and the price of your item, but the range that we typically see is between 10% and 20%. 20% on the really high end. The average across accounts that I looked at was around 14%. So that's a conversion rate you can sort of benchmark your own on. It would be interesting if anyone does have that data handy, drop in the comments, let us know where you line up. But it also depends on the price of your item, right?
Yeah.
If you're selling, you know, plastic forks or something that's highly consumable and very inexpensive, your conversion rate should definitely be on the higher end because people are going in, if it is what they searched for, they're checking out.
Like a low-priced commodity item, essentially.
Absolutely. If you're selling, you know, higher end apparel and you're up selling, you know, a jacket for $200, your conversion rate's going to be lower. So you're probably going to be in the single digits there, closer to 3%.
Right. Or a super saturated category.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's a ton of competition and people are clicking around, that conversion rate may suffer. But yeah, to summarize on that side of things, that conversion rate should be in the low teens. And if it's not, I would be reviewing my imagery, reviewing my product price compared to the market. Looks like we got Jamal has his click-through rate of right at 0.28%. So that's right in line with what we were talking about of having that average be right around 0.3%. So it's good to see that sort of holds true. Looks like Brandon has a question coming in. Total ad spend is 25% of sales, but the Amazon sponsored products ACOS is north of 100%. Should I be concerned? So this is hitting on a lot of good points. So one, what percentage of total sales do you guys typically see coming from sponsored products?
I would probably say between 15 and 30, 35%.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so typically, yeah, I think you're, Brandon, you're probably on the higher end of having 31% of your sales come from sponsored products. Typically, it's in that range of 15 to 30%. And interesting that you're already sort of a step ahead of looking at that ad spend divided by overall total sales, because I think that is something that a lot of sellers maybe don't take that extra step to calculate because it's not readily available in Seller
Yeah.
Central, right? In Seller Central, if you're in the campaign manager, you're just seeing that ACOS. So yeah, I mean, it depends, Brandon, on what what your objective is and where you are in the product lifecycle. So if you're just launching this product and you're trying to get incremental views and sales, and this is something where you're investing in your own brand, I don't think it's too much of a concern to be north of 100% for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Obviously, that type of spend isn't sustainable.
Yeah, I'm also curious, just like to get into specifics, what time period he's looking at. Because I find people looking at like week to date a lot to see their ACOS,
Right.
which is very inaccurate.
No, that's a great point. I mean, when we're talking, this whole theme today is measuring your success. A great question that we'll get asked is, at what time, how should I be measuring it over what time period?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a struggle because Amazon actually has a 3-day lag period in their reporting. So when you make a sale from your sponsored ads, Amazon won't tell you that the click or spend was attributed to that sale for up to 3 days. I feel like that was a bit wordy. Perhaps you can simplify.
No, it's a good point. There's a 7-day attribution window. So when you're looking at those metrics in Campaign Manager, they can change for up to a week after the point. And if they are changing, you want to make sure you're not making changes too early in the process, right? Wait for those to come in, because you're going to see that spend and clicks immediately. So I can look at today's metrics and see that, oh my God, I've spent $100 and I don't see any sales. Well, that just means you have to wait for that attribution to come into play.
Yeah, I
Right,
think
so
a lot of people are shocked by that initially.
Right. So yeah, I mean, especially those drop downs of week to date or month to date are really not helpful at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the month,
Right.
because it's all the spend that doesn't have the sales attributed back to it.
I would also say that you should never look at just a 7-day window when you're
Right.
basically gauging whether or not your campaigns are successful, because it's just simply not enough data to
Yeah.
make any educated decisions or inferences about. I would probably say you should look at 14 to 30 days worth of data when you're trying to gauge how successful your campaigns are, and always use at least a 3-day buffer. So what's the date today? The 8th?
Today is the 8th.
So I would recommend looking back from, 2/5? So 1/5 to 2/5,
Yeah.
if you were to look at 30 days.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think it looks like, was your hair in the way? Someone was saying your microphone's buzzing. You good now?
Perhaps. Sorry, Jamal. I did remove my hair.
It looks like Brandon's been launching his product for about a month. I would say, having that ACOS, as long as you have that marketing spend budgeted, I wouldn't be concerned with a high ACOS at this point, because sponsored products are driving 1/3 of your sales. So, in that launch phase, that's okay to be investing. After the 3-month period, if you're not able to successfully bring that ACOS down to a profitable rate, that is something I would start to be concerned about. But 1 month in, I think you're totally fine with that type of spend. It's something that you're going to need to do to launch that product. Marie is asking, is this webinar recorded? So yeah, all of our past TeikaTVs you can find in the video section of our Facebook page here. So feel free to go back and review those. Looks like Ronan is joining from the UK. His click-through rate is 0.24%. Is that normal? Yeah, that's right around what we were saying. We see the average rate around 0.3%. So anything from 0.15, 0.2 up to 0.35, 0.4% is right in that range. Obviously, the higher it is, the more relevant people are finding your ad and clicking on it. The lower that number, maybe take a look back and say, why exactly aren't they clicking on it?
Yeah, I was thinking, we talked about things externally, like you could do on your listing or on your title or photos to increase the click-through rate and the conversion rate. But you could also look at the keywords you're using in your campaigns. Are you just using too many keywords that aren't very relevant to your product, like keyword stuffing, instead of finding the most relevant ones for you.
Yeah, and Kathleen, I think that's a great point, that we'll see sometimes sellers are really focused on maximizing the number of keywords that they're bidding on.
Like
and
huge.
It's like, oh, I want to take 1,000, I want to maximize this ad group and have 1,000 keywords in there. And that's really not how you're going to win, right? It's looking at the data, seeing where you have the most success, and going from there. It's not about the volume of keywords. And I've said this in the past, if I had to give you a number of keywords to focus on, I would say 25 to 40 is like the maximum I think you would need in an ad group. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I was wondering if you had thoughts on, like, if somebody's business model was to sell something for only 2 months or 3 months, like, do you ever see a reason for someone to just put a bunch of keywords in, or is there a better way?
Yeah, it's a challenge. If you're only selling something for a couple months and you don't see a huge, if you don't want to make an investment in the long term and build up that sales rank and continue to profit from that item, I would be less aggressive on sponsored products, because
that's a good point.
if I know I'm not committed to this product in the long term, I don't want to invest in the sales rank and pay for those clicks if it's not something I'm going to be reinvesting in.
Also, perhaps if it's a seasonal item, what would be more useful than just stuffing full of keywords is using an automatic campaign. Like, figure out what works well this season and let Amazon do the heavy lifting for you. And then next season, you'll have that data and you'll be able to add the most relevant terms as keywords. Yeah. So I think the answer is always.
And if it is the case where you're using a piece of software, you can, like ours, you could have that data, but just keep in mind those search term reports are only 60 days. So if you're trying to pull that data from Seller Central, make sure you're pulling that on a regular basis and saving it down, because if you come back next year, you're not going to be able to see what those search terms were that worked for you in the previous year. So thanks to everyone who's just joining us now, and thanks for writing in on those comments. Glad to see we got that microphone situation all sorted out, Jamal.
I need a haircut. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah. Leon's asking, would you say the keywords that Amazon suggests are good? I mean, I think it's a good place to start. I would use some of those suggestions. To Alex's point, I would use the automatic campaigns to generate search term data. And I would also, use your brain, right? You know your products best, and I would start with those broad keywords that are going to be highly relevant to your products, and then rely on that search term data from there.
Yeah.
So we've hit on click-through rate. Seems like a couple people in the audience have click-through rate right around where we see the average of around 0.25 to 0.3%. That conversion rate was that next metric we talked about. So once people land on the page, how likely are they to then order that good? That was in the range of 10 to 20% on average, right around 14%. Again, with that sort of sliding scale as it relates to your price. With the price increases, we see that conversion rate come down closer to the single digits. With those highly consumable, inexpensive products, should be closer to that 20%. If you're really suffering on conversion rate, that means you're paying for a lot of clicks that don't end up with sales, right? And that can be really detrimental in the long term, because not only are you paying for those clicks and not getting sales, but you're also indicating to the Amazon search engine that your product may not be a good fit for those keywords. So if you're driving traffic there and not getting the conversion, you really have to dive in and understand why people are leaving your page without purchasing. And that gets back to the images. It gets back to your title, and it gets back to your price. So really play with those and experiment with those variables if you're seeing a really bad conversion rate.
I think that's like a really important point too, because a lot of people, I mean, if someone's clicking on your ads and they're not buying your products, then your organic ranking is also going to be hurt by that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not something where you're just paying for those clicks. It's actually hurting you overall to have people be landing on your page and not buying.
Right. So organically, like, it's a give and a take. It's what do we call it? The flywheel effect.
Yeah.
It can be super positive, and it can increase your sales rank for a lot of keywords and get you up there a lot. But it could also do the opposite too, if you're bidding and you're not converting.
Yeah.
So that's important, I think.
And I think we had a question come in earlier around organic sales and where you find those. You can see them in multiple places in Seller Central, but those business reports are really helpful. And when we're talking about organic sales, we're talking about those that are coming from clicks that you aren't paying for through sponsored products. So you can look at your overall sales in those business reports, look at in Campaign Manager to see those sales coming from sponsored products, and monitor that percentage. Like we said, about 15 to 30% of total sales typically come from sponsored products. So if you're, if you have a lot lower of a number than that, and you're only getting, 5 to 10% of your sales through sponsored products, that probably means you can be doing more advertising and getting more of a lift. If you're on the higher end of that, it probably means your product is just in that launch phase and you're more reliant on that paid advertising, which is not a bad place to be if you're just getting started, but it is a bit risky in the long term if you're relying too heavily on sponsored products.
I think there's another question on organic rank too.
Great.
And I like what's happening here. Leon is answering Marie as well.
Oh, love to see that
interaction within the comments. But
sellers helping sellers. I love it.
But yeah, Marie was asking if your organic rank, like sponsored products help get your organic rank to first page, should you shut it down then?
Yeah, great question, and that's always a debate, but I would continue to advertise. So it never hurts to be showing up in multiple pages on that Amazon page, right? You don't have a ton of power when it comes to what your product looks like, right? It's all determined by Amazon. If you're lucky to have that great organic ranking, it doesn't hurt to also have your product somewhere else at the top of the search or on the bottom or on the side, because that just means you're more likely to get a click. And it's also a way to play defense, right? Because if you turn off your sponsored products, that opens up those spots for your competitors.
Who definitely will pay to play.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
So, I mean, just as quickly as you may have found that you can get on the first page organically, someone else can do the same thing. Right. So, it'd be my advice not to turn off advertising once you're ranking well organically, but, to continue to supplement your organic sales with sponsored products.
I do think it's a good point, though. It's like ideally, if you're already ranked super high on page 1, you obviously don't want to have to pay for the sales if you don't have to.
Sure.
So I think just devil's advocate, I mean, what would you do if you really didn't want to pay for the sales? Would it be horrible to turn it off?
Yeah, so I sort of think about it and break down keywords into a couple different buckets. So one being my own brand. Typically, if I'm smaller, those are pretty cheap clicks and they usually convert really well because someone's actually looking for you. So those are usually really cheap and not a problem in terms of an expense. Then there's like generic terms where they're not searching for your product in particular or another brand. Those could be an area of expense. And
like yoga mat, for instance.
And then the third would be the competitor brands. So if you break out your keywords like that, you can determine where you want to be more aggressive or less aggressive. And maybe you say, okay, I want to continue to protect my own brand and I want to go after those competitor brands to steal sales away, but I'm going to scale back on some of those more generic terms because I'm placed so well organically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think it's never a smart idea to cut it off completely because you're just sort of letting the competition come in and take those spots.
I think that's really good advice, to be honest.
So you agree with Leon? He had it.
Yeah, Leon's nailing it. We'll have to invite him to the next to be the next
guest star.
Yeah.
Marco too. We got some more great advice.
Awesome. And then Leon's asking, do you ever optimize an auto campaign for data collecting? So absolutely. So there's several things you can do with those automatic campaigns. So you can adjust those bids at that ad group level. And then you can also take advantage of negative keywords. So that's a really powerful tool to help optimize automatic campaigns and manual campaigns. But more specifically on the automatic side, you can cut out those search terms that are more expensive and not driving sales to really improve the overall performance of that campaign. So looks like there's a few other back and forth. But before we get to the bottom of the hour, I want to hit on our final sort of metric around ACOS, right? So that's really what sellers see the most, are typically the most concerned with, and we'll get the question, what is a good ACOS?
Yeah.
What do you think?
There's not one answer to that question.
That's right.
But it's the worst answer to give to someone
because
it's so ambiguous.
Yeah, and touched on this, but what we see is a range, and again, this sort of depends on the category, depends on the price of the item, depends on the life cycle of where you are. But on average, 15 to 25% feels about right. And I pulled the numbers, and it's our average that we see across all of our sellers is around 18%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just based on the goal or objective of the campaign.
And that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so say like you're launching a product and you're willing to spend more than your margin, then it's totally fine to be at 100%, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But if you're a reseller who has really thin margins beneath 10%, you obviously want to make incremental revenue on every single one of those sales. So ideally, your ACOS would be beneath your adjusted gross margin of that item.
Right, yeah, if you're not investing in the brand, it's not something that it's your own private label and you see that long-term investment paying off. If you're simply reselling items, you don't want to be spending more than your margin on advertising because then you're losing money on every sale.
Right, should we clarify what margin, like how we would calculate margin?
How would you calculate margin?
I would probably take the price of the item minus all of the expenses associated with the product. So things like your manufacturing cost, Amazon FBA fees, FBA commission, but not including advertising costs. And then you'll be able to figure out how much are you making in your pocket in the percentage form and make sure your ACOS is beneath that.
Yeah,
is that correct?
And a lot of people hate the ACOS metric. I don't hate it. Because it's so easy to understand in the context of your P&L. So if you say, okay, my product cost, what I'm paying my vendors is 30% of my sale, my FBA fees are 15%, my ACOS is 20%. Once you add up all of those, they should be under 100%, in the long run. Or else you're losing money. Again, completely a sound strategy to be investing if it is your brand and you're looking to build that awareness and drive those first sales during the launch phase. So it looks like we just will answer a couple more questions and then close for today. So as a reminder, what have we hit on? So it's been all around measuring your success with sponsored products. Talked through that click-through rate going from impressions to clicks, the conversion rate from clicks to orders, and then your ACOS. So what is your spend divided by your sales? During that time, we also hit on what's an appropriate window of time to be looking at. We recommend around 30 days. Keep in mind you shouldn't be paying too much attention to those week-to-date or month-to-date metrics, especially at the beginning of a week or month, because you may panic because the spend is there but the sales aren't yet populated. And then, as you continue to mature, make sure you understand your full P&L and all of your costs, and know where advertising fits in that sort of game. So, what do we have for final questions before we sign off today?
Yeah, I like this question. It seems like auto campaigns almost always outperform manual campaigns in terms of ACOS for rate. And I think that's interesting, and I would wonder, where are you getting the keywords from your manual campaign?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to see the opposite, that in the long term, manual campaigns are typically more efficient than automatic campaigns. So it may be an opportunity there for you to make some optimizations on the manual side to drive a lower ACOS. And over time, I see a lot of the budget shifting, right? Where you may be doing automatic campaigns and getting that keyword discovery and casting that broad net at the beginning, but as you get more and more data, you're able to hone in on those terms on the manual side, and typically that leads to a lower ACOS.
Something I've also seen is if you're not negating the exact search term that you're moving over into manual, you may still get clicks on both sides.
Right.
Yeah. Especially if the auto campaign has a ton more volume. So you would want to negate that while you're moving it over to make sure you can control the bid.
Yeah. Yeah, and Marie, there definitely are tools that help calculate profit, ours being one of them. So feel free to hit us up at TeikaMetrics.com, and you can get a free demo of the software. One of our features is the Profitability Analyzer, which lets you look at all of your costs, including sponsored products. So with that, I think we will sign off for today. Thanks to everyone for joining. We had a great conversation. Thanks for all of the comments, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you guys throughout the week. And again, we'll be back on Thursday, because if it's Thursday, it's TeikaTV. So see everyone next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.